The mission in Libya is now under the command of NATO, while we continue to see the pendulum swing in terms of who controls the major regions there. We know the members of the CIA, at least, have their boots on the ground, and there is new evidence that the question of whether or not to arm the rebels there was answered weeks ago in an order signed by President Obama, saying, well, let's do it. What will the implications of all of this be? I want to go now to one of our favorite guests here on RT, and that is rapper LowKey. He's in London right now. Hey there, LowKey. It's been a while since we've last spoken, and a few things have happened, you could say, including UN Resolution 1973 and the West's involvement in Libya. There are so many theories about why Libya, why not elsewhere, why anywhere at all. I want to get your thoughts on this.
Personally, I believe that the interests at work here are the US, Britain and France's interests are in sustaining civil war rather than reaching some type of time when things can be sort of put back together and the country can be a whole. It's about sustaining the period of civil war and thus destabilizing the revolutions which took place in Tunis and in Egypt. I think it's interesting that there's such a respect for these UN resolution, for the UN Resolution 1973, when Israel has violated countless UN resolutions, and the United States, Britain and France have never even considered military action, let alone sanctions.
But LowKey, what benefit does it have for the West, for the UK, France and the United States, to have such strife going on in Libya, to have these civil wars? You say they want to keep that going, but why?
Well, I think if we can specifically talk about Britain for a moment, let's look at who was next to David Cameron when he went to Egypt after the revolution. It was his friends from BAE Systems. This war is costing Britain £5 million per day. It's costing the British taxpayer £5 million per day. Now, all of that money is going to BAE Systems in terms that every weapon that Britain uses will, of course, have to be replaced. So in the terms of Britain having that role, that's what that's about. Also in terms of it being within their interest for it to be destabilized is if you have an imperial presence in Libya, and also, you know, Italy are involved in this as well, and you can just ask the Libyans about the history of Italy in the region. The French are involved. We can ask the Algerians about the history of the French in the region. We can ask the Egyptians about the history of the British. The Libyans also know about the British. They used to have a military base there. But in terms of keeping, avoiding the possibility of there being three countries that have genuine revolutions, genuine uprisings, and then being able to unite. I think that is something which the imperial powers don't really want to see. So you're saying in that part of the world,
in some ways, that this is simply about propping up the military-industrial complex?
Well, definitely, of course, but we have to also question why there's complete hypocrisy when it comes to places like Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. And then we have to look at really who created and nurtured the political elites that rule in these places. Why are Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE and Britain supporting quote-unquote democracy activists in Libya, but fighting against democracy activists in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia? It doesn't really make sense.
LowKey, on a personal note, I guess I want to ask you to speak for your generation, for others like you, second or third generation Muslims living in the West. You seem, and you have seemed for many months, angry about what's going on. Do you think that this is a sentiment shared, by your peers, by people like you?
I think it's important to also understand that one side of my family is English. I had a great aunt on one side of my family who was married to a man in the military that lived on a British military base in Libya. As a human being, I don't believe it is right for Britain or any other country in the world to have any type of military base in Libya. And believe me, if these powers get their way, when all is said and done, there will be a foreign military base again in Libya. And I don't believe that is acceptable. I don't expect any human being should be asked to accept that. And I also feel that if Britain is interested in defending itself against terrorism, this is really not the way to go about it. Involving itself in a war which it doesn't need to be involved in. The fact that David Cameron himself sent sniper rifles to Gaddafi in November 2010 really tells you all you need to know about the hypocrisy of the British government when it comes to Libya.
Certainly, I would imagine where you are in London, as here, in the United States, in Washington, D.C. in particular, a lot of very drastic opinions, strong opinions going on here from the people about what's happening. That was rapper LowKey. Unfortunately, we are out of time. LowKey joining us from London, England.